You think you know how a love story goes. A man, a woman, a wild frontier. But this one starts with a mistake. A terrible, chilling mistake that unearths a secret buried so deep, the snow itself was trying to keep it hidden. And it all begins with a knock on the wrong door. Montana Territory, 1869. The wind out here isn't just wind. It's a blade. It carves through the plains, shrieking like a banshee, and it piles the snow so high you forget there's a world underneath it at all. Out in the middle of this frozen nowhere, a lone figure pushes against the gale. Annabelle Sinclair. Her wool shawl is a pathetic shield against the cold that sunk deep into her bones. She's been traveling for weeks, clutching a letter from the Missouri Matrimonial Agency, a piece of paper that promised her a new life, a husband, a home. Ahead of her, a dark silhouette rises from the white hellscape. Red Bluff Ranch. Her boots crunch in the snow, the only sound besides the howl of the wind and the frantic pounding of her own heart. This is it, the end of a long, lonely road. Her gloved hand, trembling, raises to knock on the heavy wood door. But before her knuckles can even touch it, the door creaks open. A man fills the frame. He's tall, built like an oak, but it's his eyes that stop her breath. They're slate gray, as cold and empty as the winter sky. He looks right through her, like she's a ghost haunting his doorstep. His coat hangs open, just enough to see the worn leather of a gun belt and the glint of a gold wedding band on his finger. A wedding band. Annabelle swallows the lump of ice in her throat. "I'm Annabelle Sinclair," she manages, her voice thin against the wind. "I was sent by the Missouri Matrimonial Agency. I am to marry a Mr. Carter." The man doesn't move. He just blinks. Slow. Deliberate. A muscle in his jaw tightens. "My name is Colt Rafferty," he says, his voice like rocks grinding together. "And I did not order a bride." The wind slams into Annabelle's back, a cruel, invisible hand trying to shove her away. But she holds her ground. "There must be a mistake," she insists, trying to keep the panic from her voice. "The letter said this was Red Bluff Ranch. This is Red Bluff, isn't it?" "It is," he replies flatly. "But there's no Carter here. You've come to the wrong ranch, Miss Sinclair." He starts to close the door. To leave her out in the storm that's gathering strength, a storm that will surely be her end. "Please," she says, the word torn from her. "The last stagecoach left. I have nowhere else to go. The storm." Colt Rafferty hesitates. The silence stretches, filled only by the screaming wind. For a heart-stopping second, she thinks he's going to shut the door in her face. Then, with a sigh that seems to carry the weight of years, he steps aside. "One night," he growls, "just until the storm passes." Relief washes over her so powerfully, her knees feel weak. She steps across the threshold, and the warmth inside is so sudden, so profound. It feels like a memory of a life she's never lived. The house is sparse, rugged. A stone fireplace crackles, its light dancing across rough-hewn furniture. But there's a stillness here, a heavy silence that feels older and colder than the winter outside. It's the silence of a house that has forgotten the sound of laughter. Her eyes scan the room. A single child's bonnet hangs on a peg next to a man's rifle. A little wooden horse, worn smooth by tiny hands, sits abandoned by the hearth. And on the mantel, a portrait of a woman, her smile gentle but sad, her eyes looking out at a world she no longer sees. A fine layer of dust covers the frame. Colt follows her gaze. "My wife," he says, his voice stiff, clipped. "She passed 3 years ago." Annabelle nods, a knot of sorrow tightening in her chest for this stranger, for this house of ghosts. "I didn't come here to replace anyone," she says softly. I have nowhere else to be." He doesn't reply. He just gestures to a hallway. "Spare rooms down there. I'll take you to Fort Banner in the morning." She's too exhausted to argue, too cold to do anything but nod. She turns to go, her small travel trunk feeling like it's filled with lead. And that's when a sound stops them both. Soft footsteps, a tiny shuffle from the shadows. A small figure emerges. A little girl, no more than 5 years old, her bare feet silent on the wooden floor. She wears a faded blue nightdress, her dark hair a tangled mess around her pale face. But it's her eyes that steal the air from Annabelle's lungs. They're huge, dark pools of something ancient, something no child should ever know. Colt freezes. His entire body goes rigid. Emmy, he breathes, the name a pained whisper. The little girl doesn't look at him. Her gaze is fixed entirely on Annabelle. She walks forward, one slow, deliberate step after another, until she's standing right in front of the strange woman on her doorstep. The room is so quiet you could hear a snowflake land. Then tiny fingers reach out and clutch the fabric of Annabelle's skirt. The girl looks up, her eyes locking with Annabelle's. And in a voice that sounds like dusty bells, a voice that the house hadn't heard in 3 long years, she whispers 5 words that change everything. God finally sent you to us. Colt's breath catches in his throat. It's a ragged, broken sound. He takes a step forward, then another, as if moving through deep water. Emmy? He kneels, his big frame seeming to shrink. Disbelief and something that looks a lot like fear are warring on his face. She hasn't spoken, he murmurs, his words for Annabelle, but his eyes locked on his daughter. Not a word. Not since... He doesn't finish. He can't. The words are buried too deep, under 3 years of snow and silence. The little girl, Emmy, just tightens her grip on Annabelle's skirt, pressing her small body against the stranger's leg, as if seeking shelter from a storm only she can see. Annabelle's heart feels like it's shattering into 1,000 tiny pieces. She slowly kneels down, bringing herself to the child's level. She offers a gentle, cautious smile. "Hello, sweetheart," she says, her voice soft as falling snow. "My name is Annabelle." Emmy's lips tremble. A single tear traces a path down her dusty cheek. "Are you going to leave too?" she asks, the question so quiet it's barely there, a ghost of a sound. And that's it. That's the moment the ice around Annabelle's own weary heart cracks wide open. She reaches out, her fingers brushing the girl's cold cheek. "No," she promises. "Not tonight." Colt stands, his hands clenched into tight fists at his sides. He looks from his daughter, who is clinging to this stranger like a lifeline, to Annabelle, whose eyes are filled with a compassion this house hasn't known in ages. The cold mask on his face slips, just for a second, revealing a raw, desperate grief. "Stay," he says, the word rough, forced. At least until the storm passes." Annabelle gives a single nod, but a shiver runs down her spine that has nothing to do with the cold. She knows with a certainty that settles deep in her soul that the real storm isn't the one howling outside. She's already standing in the middle of it. The blizzard doesn't break. For days it rages, burying the world in a suffocating blanket of white. The ranch becomes an island in a sea of snow, cut off, isolated. Colt doesn't say much, but the morning after she arrives, he informs her, in his gruff, clipped way, that she can stay. He doesn't say it kindly, but he doesn't say it cruelly either. It's just a fact. The roads are impassable, she has no choice, and neither, it seems, does he. Annabelle accepts. She has nowhere to go, and a strange protective feeling for the silent little girl has taken root in her heart. She spends her days exploring the quiet corners of the house, a house that feels like a tomb. Time hangs heavy in the air, thick with unspoken words and forgotten memories. The portrait of Colt's wife, Eleanor, watches over the living room, her painted eyes seeming to follow Annabelle's every move. In the guest room wardrobe, Annabelle finds a dress. It's made of fine blue lace, the color of a twilight sky, now faded with time. The stitching is delicate, careful. She knows without asking that it was Eleanor's. She wonders if Colt meant to put it away and simply couldn't, or if he forgot it was there at all. The thought sends a little chill through her. Colt remains a fortress of a man. He speaks only when necessary. Woods by the hearth. Stews on the stove. He avoids her eyes, yet his actions betray a different story. He rises before dawn to add extra logs to the fire, ensuring the house is warm when she wakes. He quietly nails down a loose floorboard near her room that creaks in the night. He fixes the handle on the old kettle after he sees her struggle with it. He does these things silently, as if tending to the house itself, not the woman in it. But Annabelle notices. She sees the ghost of a caring man beneath the layers of grief and ice. Emmy, however, is another story. The little girl is like a winter rose, slowly, tentatively beginning to bloom. At first she just watches, a tiny shadow in the corner of every room Annabelle enters. She clutches a small rag doll, its button eyes long gone, her silent companion in a silent world. She doesn't speak again, but her eyes say everything. They follow Annabelle with a desperate, hopeful intensity. One afternoon, Annabelle is mending a glove by the window, the needle moving in and out of the worn leather. Emmy approaches, silent as a mouse, and places a folded piece of paper on the table beside her before scurrying away. Annabelle unfolds it. It's a child's drawing, three stick figures, a tall man, a woman with scribbled yellow hair, and a small girl in the middle, holding both their hands. Above them, a bright, cheerful sun, and beneath the girl, a single word, written in shaky, uncertain letters, Mama. Annabelle presses the drawing to her chest, her throat tight. The next morning, Emmy proudly presents her with a plate of biscuits. They're lopsided and half-burnt, and the kitchen smells of smoke, but Annabelle accepts them like a gift from a queen, eating every last crumb with a smile. And for the first time, Emmy smiles back. It's a tiny, fragile thing, a flicker of light in the shadows, but it's real. Slowly, the distance between them closes. One evening, as a fire crackles in the hearth, Emmy climbs into Annabelle's lap, curling up against her as if she's been doing it her whole life. Annabelle finds a worn Bible on a dusty shelf and begins to read aloud. The stories are old, the words complex, but Emmy just listens, her little head resting on Annabelle's chest, her fingers tracing the patterns on her sleeve. From across the room, hidden in the shadows by the window, Colt watches them. He doesn't move, doesn't speak. He just watches this strange woman coax life back into his silent daughter, and the expression on his face is a tangled mess of pain, hope, and something else. Something that looks dangerously like fear, because under every soft moment, every shared smile, a dark question lingers. The house may be healing, but it is not whole. The ghost of Eleanor is in every corner, and the secret of her death, of Emmy's 3 years of silence, remains locked away. And Annabelle is beginning to suspect that Colt Rafferty isn't just a grieving husband. He's a man with a secret he'd kill to keep. The first clue comes by accident. Colt is out in the barn, his silhouette a dark shape against the endless white, as he breaks the ice on the water trough for the horses. The house is quiet, save for the whisper of the wind at the eaves. Emmy is napping, her small chest rising and falling in a peaceful rhythm. Annabelle, seeking a moment of peace herself, decides to light a fire in the small stove in the parlor. The room is colder than the rest of the house, less used. The piano sits in the corner like a coffin, its keys yellowed with age. As she searches the mantel for a box of matches, her fingers brush against a loose stone in the fireplace surround. Curiosity gets the better of her. She wiggles it gently. It comes free, revealing a small, dark cavity behind it. And inside that cavity is a book. It's a small, leather-bound journal. Her heart hammers against her ribs. She knows she shouldn't. This is a violation, a trespass into a grief that isn't hers. But the secrets of this house feel like a physical weight, and she has to know. Her hands trembling, she opens it. The handwriting is elegant, flowing. Eleanor Rafferty, the inside cover reads. The first few entries are full of hope and love. Descriptions of building the ranch with Colt, the birth of Emmy, the simple joys of a life carved out of the wilderness. But as she flips through the pages, the tone begins to change. The entries become shorter, the handwriting more frantic. October 12th. Colt was angry again. A spat over nothing. A misplaced hammer. But his eyes, they get so dark. It frightens me. October 29th. He's been drinking more. He says it's the pressure of the ranch, the coming winter. But it changes him. He becomes someone I don't recognize. November 5th. He threw a plate against the wall tonight. Emmy saw. She cried for an hour. He didn't even seem to remember doing it in the morning. He just looked at the broken porcelain on the floor and asked what happened. Annabelle's blood runs cold. She reads on, her breath held tight in her chest. The final entry is dated 3 years ago, the night before Eleanor disappeared, November 17th. He knows. I don't know how, but he knows. I saw the way he looked at me today. Not with anger, but with a coldness that terrified me more than any rage. He knows about the letters. I have to get Emmy out of here. We'll go to my sister's in the morning. We just have to survive one more night. Annabelle slams the journal shut. Her hands are shaking uncontrollably. The letters? What letters? And what did Colt know? The image of the strong, silent man in the barn shifts, darkens, warps into something monstrous. The man who mended the kettle, who put his coat around her in the storm, could he be capable of... No, she can't believe it, but the journal doesn't lie. Later that day, she finds the courage to ask him. She finds him in the tack room, mending a bridle, his hands strong and sure as they work the leather. Colt, she begins, her voice steadier than she feels. I've never asked, what happened to Eleanor? You said she passed, but... He stills. The needle in his hand pauses mid-stitch. He doesn't look at her. It was an accident, he says, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. A hunting accident. She was out checking traps along the ridge. A stray shot. A lie. A cold, calculated lie. Annabelle can feel it in her bones. A hunting accident? Then why did the journal speak of fleeing? Why the fear? Who fired the shot? She presses, her heart pounding. He finally looks up, and his gray eyes are like chips of ice. Does it matter, Miss Sinclair? He asks, a dangerous edge to his voice. She's gone. Raking up the past won't bring her back. He turns back to the bridle, his message clear. The conversation is over, but for Annabelle it has just begun. She now knows two things for certain. 1. Colt Rafferty is lying about his wife's death. 2. She is trapped in a house with a man who may be a killer and a little girl who may have been a witness. The storm outside is nothing compared to the one that's about to break inside the walls of Red Bluff Ranch. The next few days are a nightmare of quiet tension. Annabelle moves through the house like a ghost, her every nerve ending screaming. She watches Colt, searching his face for any sign of the monster described in the journal, but all she sees is a man drowning in his own grief. He's quiet, withdrawn, but never cruel. He still makes sure the fire is lit. He still watches Emmy with a sad, helpless love in his eyes. Could Eleanor have been wrong? Could she have misjudged him? Or is he just a very, very good actor? The doubt is eating her alive. She hides the journal, tucking it deep inside her travel trunk, feeling its weight like a stone against her heart. She tries to act normal for Emmy's sake. She reads to her, helps her with her drawings, but the easy warmth between them is gone, replaced by a constant thrumming fear. Emmy seems to sense it. The little girl grows quiet again, her fragile smile fading, her eyes filling with that old, familiar sadness. Annabelle knows she needs help. She needs another voice, someone outside these suffocating walls who can tell her the truth. She remembers the townsfolk mentioning an old widow, a Mrs. Hargrove, who lived in a small cabin a few miles down the ridge. They said she was half blind, but saw more than most. She waits for a day when the snow lets up slightly, and Colt takes the wagon into Fort Banner for supplies. It's a risk. He told her not to wander, but she has to know. Bundling herself in every layer she owns, she sets out, following the snow-covered track that leads away from the ranch. The cold is brutal, the silence of the woods profound. After an hour of walking, she sees it, a wisp of smoke curling up from a tiny dilapidated cabin tucked into a stand of pines. Mrs. Hargrove answers the door. She's a tiny woman, bent and wrinkled as a dried apple, with a long, jagged scar running down the side of her neck. One of her eyes is milky white, but the other is sharp and clear, and it sizes Annabelle up in an instant. "You're the one," the old woman rasps, her voice like dry leaves skittering across pavement. "The one staying with Colt Rafferty." "Yes," Annabelle says, her breath fogging in the frigid air. "I have some questions. About his wife. About Eleanor." Mrs. Hargrove grunts and motions her inside. The cabin is one small room, cluttered but warm. "Questions," she mutters, shuffling over to a rocking chair by the fire. "Everyone's got questions about that night." "What night?" Annabelle asks, her heart beginning to pound. "The night she vanished," the old woman says, her good eye fixing on Annabelle. 3 years back. There was a storm, much like this one. Around midnight, I heard a scream. A woman's scream. Ripped the night right in two. Annabelle feels a chill that has nothing to do with the temperature. "A scream? Did you tell the sheriff?" Mrs. Hargrove lets out a dry, humorless cackle. The sheriff? Colt's cousin? Oh, I told him. He came round the next day asking questions. I told him about the scream. Told him about the tracks I saw in the snow the next morning, leading from their ranch down toward the ravine. Tracks? Annabelle leans forward. What kind of tracks? Two sets, the old woman says, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Looked like a man's boots, heavy, dragging something, and alongside him, smaller tracks, a child's. Emmy. Emmy was there. Annabelle's mind reels. What did the sheriff do? Told me I was a crazy old woman, Mrs. Hargrove spits. Said I was seeing things. Told me Colt's wife had run off, and that was that. Said it was best for everyone if I kept my mouth shut. Didn't want a scandal. She leans closer, her one good eye boring into Annabelle. But I know what I heard, and I know what I saw. That man, Colt Rafferty, he's got the devil in him, and that little girl saw it all. That's why she don't talk. She's not mute. She's terrified. Annabelle stumbles back out into the snow, her head spinning. It's worse than she imagined. A scream in the night, tracks in the snow. A cover-up. Colt didn't just lie to her. He had help. As she trudges back to the ranch, the winter sun beginning to dip below the horizon, a new, even more terrifying thought takes hold. The matrimonial agency, the letter that sent her here, to this specific ranch. She was supposed to marry a Mr. Carter, but Colt said there was no Carter here. Was it really a mistake? Or was she sent here for a reason? She thinks of the way Colt looked at her when she first arrived. Not with surprise, but with a flicker of something else. Recognition? No, that wasn't it. It was appraisal, like he was measuring her up for something. She thinks of Eleanor's blue dress, still hanging in the wardrobe, a dress that's roughly her size. She thinks of Emmy's first words, God finally sent you to us, as if she'd been waiting for a replacement. The horrifying truth dawns on her, cold and sharp as an icicle through the heart. She wasn't sent to the wrong ranch by mistake. She was chosen, lured here, a replacement bride for a dead woman, brought to a remote, isolated ranch to care for a traumatized child and a man who is almost certainly a murderer. She isn't a guest, she's a prisoner, and the snow-covered landscape that she thought was her prison is nothing compared to the walls of the house she now has to call home. She is trapped, miles from anyone, with a killer in his silent witness, and night is falling. Panic is a cold, tight fist in Annabelle's chest. She has to get away. She has to take Emmy and run. But where? The snow is waist-deep in places, the nearest town a full day's journey on foot, if she could even find the way. And Colt would be back any minute. She bursts through the door of the ranch house, her mind racing. She needs the journal. It's the only proof she has. She runs to her room, throws open her trunk, and her heart stops. The journal is gone. She tears through her belongings, her movements frantic. It's not there. He must have found it. He knows that she knows. A floorboard creaks in the hallway. Annabelle freezes, every muscle in her body screaming. She slowly turns. Colt is standing in the doorway. His face is unreadable, a mask of stone. He holds the leather-bound journal in his hand. Looking for this? He asks, his voice dangerously quiet. The silence in the room is absolute. Annabelle can't breathe, can't think. All she can see is the journal in his hand. A death sentence. I was drunk, he says, his voice a low rumble. He takes a step into the room. That night, I don't remember all of it. We argued. She said she was leaving, taking Emmy. He takes another step. I woke up the next morning on the floor by the fire. There was blood on my shirt, on the floorboards. She was gone. Her coat was gone. Annabelle slowly backs away until her legs hit the bed. You told me it was a hunting accident. I lied, he says simply. He's closer now, only a few feet away. The sheriff, my cousin, he found her cloak down by the ravine, torn, blood on it. He said it was better this way. Better to say she ran off. Better than a murder trial I couldn't win. Because I don't remember Annabelle. I've spent 3 years trying to remember what happened in this house that night. But there's just nothing. A black hole where my memory should be. He looks at her, and for the first time, she sees the torment in his eyes, the raw, desperate agony of a man who doesn't know if he's a monster. Do you believe you hurt her? She whispers, the words catching in her throat. His jaw clenches. I don't know. Suddenly, a small sound comes from the hallway. Emmy, she's standing there, clutching her rag doll, her wide eyes darting between her father and Annabelle. She must have woken from her nap and heard the raised voices. Colt's face softens as he looks at his daughter. She was there, he says, his voice breaking. She saw what happened, and whatever it was, it stole her voice. Emmy takes a tentative step into the room, then another. She walks past her father, her gaze fixed on Annabelle. She reaches the bed and climbs up, pressing her small, cold body against Annabelle's side, seeking comfort, seeking protection. And as she settles in, she begins to hum. It's a soft, simple tune, a lullaby. Annabelle recognizes it instantly. It's the same tune as the music box on the mantel, the one she'd found wound tightly shut. Eleanor's music box. Colt's eyes widen in recognition. She used to sing that, he whispers. Eleanor. She sang that to Emmy every night. Emmy continues to hum, her eyes closed, as if lost in a memory. Then she stops. Her eyes flutter open, and she looks directly at Colt. She points a tiny finger, not at him, but at the window behind him. And she speaks, her first real word in 3 years, clear and sharp in the silent room. Man. Annabelle and Colt both turn to look. There's nothing there but the swirling snow, the fading light. What, Emmy? Colt asks gently. What man? Emmy shakes her head, her little face scrunched in frustration. She points again, more insistently this time. Man, she repeats. Loud man. Annabelle's mind flashes back to the journal. He knows about the letters. What letters? Who was Eleanor writing to? Colt, Annabelle says, her voice urgent. Eleanor's journal. She mentioned letters, that she was afraid because you knew about them. Who was she writing to? Colt looks confused. Letters? I don't know anything about letters. She never said anything. But Annabelle sees a flicker of something in his eyes. A lie. He does know. Don't lie to me, Colt, she says, her voice rising. Not now. Emmy is trying to tell us something. He runs a hand over his face, his composure finally cracking. There was a man, he admits, his voice low and strained, a ranch hand we hired a few months before it happened. His name was Danner. I saw them talking once, too close. I saw her pass him a letter. I confronted her about it. That's what we were arguing about that night. What happened to him? Annabelle presses. He left, Colt says. Packed his things and cleared out the day after she disappeared. Said he was heading west. The pieces start to click into place, forming a picture more terrifying than she could have imagined. A jealous husband, a secret correspondent, a child witness who says there was another man, a loud man. The scream Mrs. Hargrove heard. It wasn't Eleanor screaming because Colt was hurting her. It was her screaming because someone else was. A loud knock echoes through the house, making them all jump. It's at the front door. Loud, insistent. Colt looks at Annabelle, his eyes wide with a new kind of fear. No one comes to the ranch in a storm like this. No one. He moves cautiously out of the room and down the hall. Annabelle holds Emmy tight, her heart hammering against her ribs. She hears the heavy bar on the door being lifted. She hears the door creak open. And then she hears a voice she doesn't recognize, but it's thick with a false, menacing cheerfulness. Howdy, Rafferty, the voice says. Long time no see. I was just passing through, thought I'd see if my old job was still open, and to see if you'd found your pretty wife yet. Annabelle's blood turns to ice. Danner. He didn't go west. He came back. Colt stands frozen in the doorway, staring at the man he hasn't seen in 3 years. Danner. He looks older, harder, a cruel smile twisting his lips. Snow is caked on his shoulders, his horse standing behind him, tired and steaming in the cold. Danner, Colt says, his voice a low growl. What the hell are you doing here? Just passing through, like I said. Danner replies, his eyes scanning the inside of the house over Colt's shoulder. His gaze lingers on the hallway leading to the bedrooms. Heard you got yourself some new company. Figured you might need an extra hand around the place. Colt's hand instinctively moves towards the gun on his hip. We're fine. You should go. Danner's smile widens, but it doesn't reach his cold, dead eyes. Now that ain't very neighborly, Colt. Not in a storm like this. Besides, I think the little lady and I need to get acquainted. He tries to push past Colt into the house. Colt blocks him, his body a wall of muscle. You're not welcome here, Danner. In the bedroom, Annabelle listens, her mind racing. This isn't a chance visit. He came back for a reason. He knows she's here. But how? The matrimonial agency. Was he the one who orchestrated it? Was he the Mr. Carter she was meant to marry? Was this whole thing a twisted game to get back to this ranch? She looks down at Emmy, who is trembling in her arms, her face buried in Annabelle's dress. She's terrified of the voice in the hall. The loud man is here. Annabelle knows they are in terrible danger. She has to do something. Her eyes dart around the room, landing on the heavy iron poker resting by the small fireplace. It's not much, but it's something, she whispers in Emmy's ear. I want you to hide, sweetheart, under the bed, and don't you make a sound until I come and get you. Do you understand? Emmy looks up, her eyes wide with fear, but she nods. She scrambles off the bed and crawls into the dark space beneath it, pulling a loose blanket with her. Annabelle grabs the poker, its weight cold and solid in her hands. She creeps to the bedroom door, listening. The voices from the front of the house have grown louder, angrier. She was writing to me, you drunken fool. Danner is shouting. She was gonna leave you. She was gonna take the girl and come with me. You're a liar, Colt roars back. There's a sudden thud, a grunt of pain. Annabelle's heart leaps into her throat. She peers around the doorframe. Colt is on the floor, Danner standing over him. Colt's own rifle in his hands. He must have grabbed it from the peg by the door. I should have finished you off that night, Danner snarls, pressing the barrel of the rifle against Colt's head. Would have saved me a lot of trouble. He glances around the room, his eyes wild. Now where is she? Where's the new one? His eyes land on Annabelle, peeking out from the hallway. A slow, triumphant grin spreads across his face. There you are, pretty thing. I went to a lot of trouble to get you here. That old fool at the agency was easy to bribe. He starts walking towards her, leaving Colt dazed on the floor. See? I figured it was time to come back and claim what's mine. This ranch. And a wife to go with it. Eleanor was perfect, but she got difficult. You'll be much more agreeable, I think. Annabelle stands her ground, gripping the poker so tightly her knuckles are white. You killed her, she says, her voice shaking but clear. Danner laughs. She wasn't supposed to fight back or scream. You came at me with a fire poker just like that one. Had to shut her up. Your man here, he stumbled in, drunk as a skunk. Saw her on the floor. I hit him. He went down like a sack of grain. Easy to make him think he did it himself. I dragged her out to the ravine, but the little brat followed me. Saw the whole thing. His eyes narrow. Speaking of which, he looks past Annabelle, towards the bedroom. Where is she? You'll never find her, Annabelle spits. Oh, I will, he says, taking another step. But first, you and I are going to come to an understanding. He lunges for her. Annabelle swings the poker with all her might. She catches him in the shoulder, and he cries out in pain and rage. The rifle clatters to the floor, but he's bigger, stronger. He grabs the poker, wrests it from her hands, and throws it across the room. He grabs her by the arms, his fingers digging into her flesh like talons. You've got fire, he hisses, his face inches from hers. I like that. He shoves her back against the wall, his body pinning her. She struggles, kicks, but it's no use. His hand goes to the knife sheath at his belt. Suddenly, a blur of motion from behind him. Colt. He's back on his feet, his face a mask of pure fury. He tackles Danner from behind, sending them both crashing to the floor. The two men roll across the floorboards, a tangle of fists and curses. It's a brutal, desperate fight. Danner is fueled by a mad obsession, Colt by 3 years of guilt and a primal need to protect his home. Annabelle scrambles for the rifle. Her hands close around the cool wood and steel. She raises it, tries to get a clear shot, But they're moving too fast, too violently. Danner gets the upper hand. He slams Colt's head against the floor. Once, twice. Colt goes limp. Danner rolls off him, gasping for breath, a bloody gash on his forehead. He sees Annabelle with the rifle and sneers. "You ain't got the guts," he pants, slowly getting to his feet. He starts walking towards her again, confident, menacing. "Get away from her," a small voice says. Danner stops. He turns. Emmy is standing in the bedroom doorway. She's no longer hiding. In her small hands, she holds the old, heavy revolver from Colt's gun belt. He must have taken it off when he came inside and left it on his dresser. It's huge in her hands, but she holds it steady, both hands gripping the handle, and it is pointed directly at Danner's chest. Her face is a mixture of terror and fierce determination, the face of a little girl who has seen too much and will not stand by and watch it happen again. Danner actually laughs, a harsh, ugly sound. "What are you going to do with that, little mouse? You don't even know how to—" The explosion is deafening in the small house. The rifle in Annabelle's hand smokes. Danner looks down at his chest, a dark red stain blossoming on his shirt. He looks up at Annabelle, his eyes wide with shock and disbelief. Then he looks at Emmy, who is still standing there, holding her father's gun, her tiny body unmoving. He takes one staggering step, then another before he collapses onto the floor, a dead weight. Silence descends on the room, thick and heavy, broken only by the howl of the wind outside. Annabelle lowers the rifle, her body shaking so violently she can barely stand. Colt groans, stirring on the floor. Emmy finally lowers the heavy revolver. She looks at Annabelle, then at Colt, who is pushing himself up on his elbows. And then, the little girl who hadn't spoken in 3 years, who had lived in a world of silent terror, opens her mouth, and she begins to scream. Not a scream of fear. It's a scream of release, of anger, of grief. A primal, gut-wrenching sound that purges 3 years of silence from her tiny body. It's the sound of a nightmare finally ending. The aftermath is a blur of motion and raw emotion. While Colt, dazed but alive, ties up the wounded and bleeding Danner, Annabelle rushes to Emmy, scooping the still sobbing child into her arms. She holds her tight, rocking her back and forth, whispering words of comfort, her own tears mixing with the child's. "It's over, sweetheart," she murmurs over and over. "It's over, you're safe." Colt, his face bruised and swollen, secures Danner to a chair. The man is conscious, glaring at them with pure hatred, a trail of blood dripping from the wound in his shoulder. The shot wasn't fatal, but it will hold him. With the immediate threat contained, Colt's attention turns fully to his daughter. He approaches slowly, kneeling before Annabelle and Emmy. He reaches out a trembling hand, stroking Emmy's hair. "Mama," Emmy sobs, clutching at Annabelle's neck. "Mama, don't go." The word hangs in the air between the three of them, a title given not by blood, but by battle. Colt freezes, his eyes locking with Annabelle's over Emmy's head. In that one shared glance, everything changes. The suspicion, the fear, the lies. It all burns away, leaving only a raw, staggering truth. This woman, this stranger who came to his door by a stroke of twisted fate, had just saved his family. She had faced down his demon and protected his child. The storm outside finally breaks the next day. The world is scrubbed clean, silent and white under a pale winter sun. As soon as the roads are clear enough, Colt rides to Fort Banner, Danner tied to a separate horse. The truth, when it finally comes out, unravels quickly. Colt's cousin, the sheriff, is brought in for questioning. Faced with a bound Danner, a talking Emmy, and Eleanor's journal, he confesses to the cover-up, claiming he only did it to protect his family from scandal. Mrs. Hargrove's testimony about the scream in the tracks confirms the story. Danner, seeing his whole twisted fantasy crumble, finally breaks. He confesses everything. How he'd become obsessed with Eleanor. How he'd killed her when she rejected him and tried to flee. How he'd framed Colt, letting the man live in a prison of guilt for 3 years. And how he'd manipulated the matrimonial agency to send Annabelle, a woman who bore a faint resemblance to Eleanor, as a replacement he could claim for himself. The town is rocked by the scandal, but they rally around the Raffertys. Justice, swift and harsh on the frontier, is served. Danner is locked away, the sheriff stripped of his badge. The cloud of suspicion that has hung over Colt for 3 years finally lifts. But the real healing happens back at the ranch. The house, once a tomb of secrets, begins to feel like a home again. The silence is gone, replaced by Emmy's chatter. She talks constantly, as if making up for lost time, her bright voice filling every corner. Annabelle's wound, a deep gash on her arm from the struggle, slowly heals. But the deeper wounds, the ones on her heart from a life of loss and loneliness, begin to mend as well. She and Colt move around each other with a new, gentle understanding. The wall of ice between them has melted, revealing the decent, loving man that grief had frozen solid. One evening, as Emmy sleeps soundly upstairs, they sit before the fire. Colt reaches over and takes her hand. His hands are rough, calloused, but his touch is gentle. "I was wrong about you, Annabelle Sinclair," he says, his voice thick with emotion. "I thought you were a mistake, a ghost sent to haunt me, but you were an answer to a prayer I didn't even know how to say." He looks at her, his gray eyes clear and full of a warmth she never thought she'd see. "You saved us, both of us." She smiles, a real, genuine smile. "We saved each other." A few weeks later, as the first signs of spring begin to thaw the frozen landscape, Annabelle finds Colt standing by the window, staring out at the mountains. She comes to stand beside him. The house is quiet, peaceful. He is holding something in his hand. He opens his palm. It's his gold wedding band. "I loved her," he says softly, his gaze distant, "and I will never forget her. But loving her doesn't mean I have to stop living." With a deep breath, he walks over to a small wooden box on the mantel, places the ring inside, and closes the lid. It's a final, quiet goodbye. Then he turns back to Annabelle. "My whole life, I've been building things," he says. "Fences, barns, a home. But I never knew how to build a family. Not really, she did all that. And when she was gone, I was lost." He takes both of her hands in his. "But you, Annabelle, you didn't just come into this house. You brought it back to life. You gave my daughter back her voice. You gave me back my soul." He drops to one knee on the worn floorboards of the ranch house in front of the crackling fire. He doesn't have another ring, nothing but the calloused hands of a rancher and a heart that's finally learned how to beat again. "I know I have no right to ask you for anything, after everything that's happened here," he says, his voice trembling slightly. "But I can't imagine this life, this home, without you in it. Annabelle Sinclair, will you stay? Will you build a life with me? Will you marry me?" Tears are streaming down Annabelle's face, but they are tears of joy. She thinks of her own past, the wounds she carried from the war, the doctor's letter that told her she could never have children of her own. She came here thinking she was broken, incomplete. She looks at this man, this flawed, grieving, beautiful man, and the child sleeping peacefully upstairs, the little girl who already called her Mama. She realizes that family isn't about being whole. It's about broken pieces fitting together to make something new, something stronger. "Yes," she whispers, dropping to her knees in front of him. "Yes, Colt, I'll marry you." The wedding is a small, simple affair at the little church in Fort Banner. The whole town comes, their faces filled with warmth and respect for the woman who solved a murder and the family that had been reborn from the ashes. Emmy, dressed in a new blue dress, acts as the flower girl, scattering petals down the aisle with a joyous, uncontainable glee. And when the preacher asks who gives this woman to be married, Emmy's voice rings out, clear and proud for all to hear. "I do." Laughter and tears fill the small church. Colt looks at Annabelle, his eyes shining, and she knows with every fiber of her being that she is finally, truly home. That night back at the ranch, the three of them sit by the fire. Emmy, sleepy and content, is curled between them. Annabelle looks around the room, at the man whose love is a quiet, steady flame, at the child whose resilience is a miracle, at the home they have forged together out of tragedy and hope. She wasn't sent to the wrong ranch. She was sent exactly where she was needed most. The letter was a lie, but the destination was her destiny. She came seeking a home and found so much more. She found a family, and in the quiet peace of the Montana night, she understood that some love stories don't start with a perfect meeting. They start with a mistake, a wrong turn, a knock on the wrong door. That leads you exactly where you were always meant to be. If this story of love, loss, and redemption on the harsh frontier captured your heart, then you're in the right place. Here at Wild West Chronicles, we dig up the forgotten tales of the brave souls who built a life in a world of dust and danger. The story of Annabelle, Colt, and Emmy reminds us that sometimes the family you find is the one you were meant to have all along. It's a story about how courage isn't just about facing down a villain with a gun. It's about facing the ghosts of the past and choosing to love again. If you want more stories that prove the human spirit is the toughest thing on the frontier, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. You won't want to miss a single tale of survival, justice, and the unlikely loves that blossomed in the wild, untamed West. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.